Hi, this is Miss Monk, and today's podcast is Harry Understands Courage, Sacrifice, and Honor. Those factors aren't listed in any sort of hierarchy, but these elements are attributed to any honorable veteran. This month, November, is dedicated to honoring the soldiers who serve in the military services. Each November, the U.S. President signs a proclamation declaring November National Veterans and Military Families Month. And with hundreds of thousands of service members deployed overseas, recognizing the daily sacrifices made by active duty, Guard, and Reserve military families is paramount. For the US, the UK, France, Australia, and Canada, November 11th also commemorates the veterans of World War I and World War II. Quote, "Let us reconsecrate ourselves to the task of promoting an enduring peace so that their efforts shall not have been in vain," unquote, by President Dwight Eisenhower, and he wrote this in his first Veterans Day proclamation in 1954. And we look forward to seeing prominent service members participate or even lead in parades, observances, and memorials for the various wars that came after World War II. It is a time when partisanship doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if you're Labor, Tory, Democrat, or Republican. It's about those who serve and have served their country. It's about being a patriot. And yet, the firm has managed to screw that up in similar fashion as an outdated wooden wheel on an automobile. Out of touch and missing the point when they refused Harry's request to lay a wreath on his behalf on Remembrance Day. First things first, for Harry to have purchased the wreath and have it prepared to go, he obviously had an expectation that this was no big deal. Didn't require a huddle of the umpires to say yay or nay. In his mind, this was simple. He is in line for the throne. He has served the military. He is still actively involved with the military veteran community. It's a no-brainer, right? But Harry still hasn't realized the depth of the firm's pettiness. He hasn't realized the bottomless pit of his grandmother's sadistic theatrics of a toothless monarchy. He hasn't realized how much his father is neutered and his brother is a complete prick. And as my mother used to say, sometimes you have to learn the hard way. And in this quite public fashion, our dear Harry learned what we already knew. Still, it hurt to see it happen. It hurt to understand that this area of his responsibility, out of everything else, is near and dear to his heart. And so the reaction was cruel. History has shown how much Betty sips on the Kool-Aid that she, as queen, is the pinnacle of humanity. After all, it's her DNA that has built empires and committed genocide under the various British royal houses. And the Windsors aren't any different as they enter the modern era. Betty holds on to the symbol of supremacy, white, if I may be so blunt, with an iron fist, and is willing to destroy her own with an evil touch of Hannibal Lecter-ish, I ate liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti. She destroyed her sister's life for the good of the order. She allowed her racist husband to say his nonsense over and over for the good of the order. She certainly didn't help Diana's life. Again, for the good of the order. And she's contributed to propping up mediocrity in Willie for the good of the order. So, nope. There is nothing fair and impartial in that old bat. And I'm going to be an old bat, so, although a kind-hearted one. So I feel like I can call her an old bat. And oh dear Willie, the fool, or rather the fox. And again, I'm going to pull from Hannibal Lecter's Silence of the Lambs with this quote, "When the fox hears the rabbit scream, he comes a-running, but not to help. And Willie is that fox. because he dearly underestimates his brother with every move on the chessboard of life. The reason for his constant need to outdo Harry or to hobble Harry is because of that artificial platform that elevates him above his wife, his children, Harry, and the rest of the British ankle biters. Don't mistake his cheesy grin and off-color jokes as giving a damn about the average person. Judge him by his actions if you think I'm harsh. And while this constant grooming to be the king is ongoing and expensive, the firm is getting a willing participant in the level of his arrogance and sense of entitlement. In this den of snakes, it's hard to know who is the puppet and who is the puppeteer, because while the House of Windsor are constitutionally safe to be the monarchy for the foreseeable future, the king and the queen makers have a prime role in managing this rodeo. They also have the power and ability to burn the house down, because guess what? They know where all the skeletons are buried, and they may have helped dig the holes. So the courtiers can be allies to Harry if they so choose, and obviously they're not. His grandmother could be kind, she chooses not to be. His father can grow a pair, but he mustn't upset Mummy. His brother can officially now be a bully, and we have seen he's a master class jackass in that department. I'm going to read some lyrics from Hamilton's, the play Hamilton. There's a song, You'll Be Back. It was King George's opining over the loss of the colonies. But these lyrics go perfectly with Betty talking to Harry. You say, the price of my love's not a price that you're willing to pay. You cry in your tea which you hurl in the sea when you see me go by. Why so sad? Remember we made an arrangement when you went away. Now you're making me mad. Remember, despite our estrangement, I'm your man. We can replace that with woman. You'll be back. Soon you'll see. You'll remember you belong to me. You'll be back. Time will tell. You'll remember that I served you well. Oceans rise, empires fall. We have seen each other through it all. And when push comes to shove, I will send a fully armed battalion to remind you of my love. And we can replace fully armed battalion with the media, the Royal Rota. You say our love is draining and you can't go on. You'll be the one complaining when I'm gone. And no, don't change the subject, 'cause you're my favorite subject, my sweet, submissive subject, my loyal, royal subject, forever and ever. You'll be back like before. I will fight and win the war. For your love, for your praise, and I'll love you till my dying days. When you're gone, I'll go mad, so don't throw away this thing we had. 'Cause when push comes to shove, I will kill your friends and family to remind you of my love. Oh, isn't that Betty? All through that song, it's Betty. So I do say that the lesson has been learned by Harry. It's a painful one, but he's going to toughen up with another layer of armor when dealing with his family. It's not the first stinging slap of disappointment and rejection since he left. Let's not forget that the review is spring of next year. And honestly, are there any signs that since Harry left, they showed any sort of support for him? There were no collaborative efforts. I think they did one with about Diana, but there was no major collaborative effort that he did with his brother or the wives did, even if it's via Zoom. And what one thing are they going to toss at them with the Royal Rota? Because they can use the Royal Rota to show that he's still part of the family, they still support him, and whatever propaganda they want to use, they haven't used any of that. Nothing. So when it comes to the review, what can they possibly talk about? What is there to review? You have done nothing. You have offered him nothing. You've allowed him to do nothing. And at this point, Harry, he's the kind of person that I think you would see pretty clear that he's not happy. We saw that at the event with the Commonwealth event. We saw he was not happy. He did not hide it. So I would love to be in this review, sitting in the room to watch this review. Now, out of Harry's own mouth, he said that he and his brother had talked about skipping out on this next in line to the throne stuff. So even if Willie had changed his mind about duty to the Queen and country, he knew of Harry's feelings. Since I can't give Willie the benefit of the doubt, I'd say that he lied to Harry that he was ever going to give up the throne. Willie went along with that scenario until he no longer had to, as he got elevated, imagining that Harry would fall in love with some woman whose only goal in life after meeting Harry would be to become a British princess and pop out some babies. But Harry was serious and true to his convictions, and that's why I called Harry a 21st century prince and did a podcast on the subject. This is where those elements of the military service, courage, sacrifice, and honor come into play as Harry continues on his life's journey. Willie is pampered and praised and never has had to display courage, hasn't done anything that required any level of sacrifice, and certainly hasn't exhibited any examples of honor or honorable behavior. The male attributes that we uphold, such as a man of character, a man of his word, a man of strength, it all falls short at Willie's feet, at Charles's feet, at Andrew's feet. And I'm not particularly impressed with Edward or Philip either. And Harry gave them the benefit of the doubt when he relied upon them to do what was right and honor his request. Try as they might, they just cannot erase Harry. They can't ignore him. They can't pretend that his contribution and his influence in British history aren't a big freaking deal. Remember those algorithms that I had mentioned in the last podcast? Remember the fake headlines? Remember the need for the news outlets to get clicks by misinformation and demonizing Harry? All of that went into overdrive when Harry and Meghan honored the U.S. veterans laid to rest in the cemetery in Los Angeles. The tools by the media to do harm were ready and available for exploitation, and it's always a 1-2 punch by this cabal, who wants attention deflected from current crises and who want the monarchy to stay traditionally insular to feed the old-fashioned fantasy of Betty's insecurities over having something to rule. Harry's no fool and is savvy, and I'm sure living in the U.S. is giving him a real-life view beyond the walls. This isn't a vacation in Burundi, enjoying a VIP-style safari. This isn't a jaunt to LA for a few days hobnobbing with the elite. And while they are millionaires, he's living a life without an army of household staff, royal handlers, protocols around having normal conversations or visiting with family members. He, better than any of the dweebs waiting for that throne, understands the weakening foundation that props up the monarchy. Look, the landscape propping up the royals and the landscape of British citizens are changing. Every incoming generation after World War II is less tied to the image of Betty wearing her World War II uniform and being a cheerleader in the country's rebuilding. We aren't in post-COVID territory yet. We don't know what that will look like, what our habits will be, what our limits will be. We aren't in the real post-Brexit territory yet. What industries will shrink? How fast will growth be? Will tying the hope of trade deals with the U.S. be sufficient to close the gap of whatever benefits and losses come with the EU? Already, there is less appetite from the public for the grandiose lifestyle of the extensive royal family. Frankly, the citizens should protest harder to keep them fiscally reeled in. And I'm on the repetitive loop saying to expect the British media to cheer whenever the royals diss Harry and Meghan. It's their contribution to Queen and country at the expense of destroying Harry's image. And expect the same British media to show fake outrage whenever Harry solidifies another piece of his independence. Mainly because they can't do exclusives or breaking news since they are out of touch with his goings on, but also because they have to pretend that it's all about Queen and country. And the deluded citizens screaming their outrage don't realize that Harry has not taken anything away from their lives. If anything, he's left his portion of his expenses on the table. Meanwhile, the other royals have added nothing but good cheer and Zoom calls to the bottom line. And last time I checked, good cheer doesn't pay the bills. So before I close, I'm going to share some sobering statistics with you about military veterans and why Harry's focus on the Invictus Games Foundation is important, and why his deployment in dangerous active areas shouldn't be forgotten or diminished and should be reason enough for him to honor the UK veterans. The US has 18 million veterans. The UK has 3.2 million. From 2005 to 2017, there was 43.6% increase in suicides in the general population, with 6% of those being in the veteran population. So it was about 124 deaths a day in 2017. Last year, the rate of suicide among active duty troops was 25.9 per 100,000. So it came out to be about 498 in total. And the US, they separate their veterans and the statistics from veterans who are no longer serving and then the active duty veterans. And so active duty veterans had about, they said, let's see, young enlisted troops account for 43% of military population, but 61% of deaths by suicide. So it was pretty high in the active category. For the UK, what I've noticed is that there's no robust way of tracking veterans after they come out of the armed services. There seems to be this dance around whether suicides are a national crisis or epidemic levels, as if reluctant to acknowledge or embarrassed by the data. The UK armed forces have seen a decline in their male suicide rates since the 1990s, according to the Ministry of Defense. In the 20-year period between 1999 and 2018, there were 310 suicides among personnel, with 292 males and 18 females. But like I said, there was an investigation by the inews.co.uk in 2018, and they said there's no comprehensive official records being kept of ex-servicemen, unlike the US, Canada, and Australia. So, they feel that you should demand more of your ministries to get involved. And basically, we owe it to these soldiers to have their backs when they come back, whether they're in or out of uniform. So in my estimation, Harry is already on the right side of history with his commitment and work to make the Invictus Game Foundation a reality. And straight from their webpage, it says, most of us will never know the full horrors of combat. Many servicemen and women suffer life-changing injuries, visible or otherwise, while serving their country. How do these men and women find the motivation to move on and not be defined by their injuries? On a trip to the Warrior Games in the USA in 2013, His Royal Highness the Duke of Sussex saw firsthand how the power of sport can help physically, psychologically, and socially those suffering from injuries and illness. He was inspired by his visit, and the Invictus Games was born. The word Invictus means unconquered. It embodies the fighting spirit of wounded, injured, and sick service personnel and personifies what these tenacious men and women can achieve post-injury. The games harness the power of sport to inspire recovery, support, rehabilitation, and generate a wider understanding and respect for those who serve their country. The Invictus game is about much more than just sport. It captures hearts, challenges minds, and changes lives. So, my note to Harry is, Dear Harry, my advice is to continue working in partnership with your wife, keep the well-being of your family as a priority, and listen to the real queen, your mom-in-law, Doria, and you'll continue walking a humble path of goodness and light. And one last thing I wanted to do was leave the U.S. National Suicide Prevention Lifeline phone number, which is 800-273-TALK. And that's 800-273-8255. And this is Miss Monk. Peace out.